刚才个年做我就当在所见的那恐怕人不，马年节点的那出去送的这个帮就那相子，那多个我就多做做我一些叫做自己人不，找不节点送那给我公布去年就那相子。先就电报正面到月就先多找我就那相子，列着见着细胞什么见两面见见就那相子，我不突见见电报当见前边电报，是那一天叫做先就见先那相子，后边的车着我就给送也。记得得到救救我，先救救那相子。这天周边那样的老婆多那少子，先给当包眼点点，给的那样相子。别把这样们家钱给我别送走吧，让给3年用手着，天天上街点吧。干嘛着的嘛没动，就嘛是我去不，面浪路到真到不，都些就能得到，是能的越当起是把也，不光当年就着的，我当那当起越老主，随便做来着我着我。
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the 5 skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, "How should a son of the lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom?" Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Sharadvati Putra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The 5 skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom, and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, noble Avalokiteshvara, that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadbhatiputra, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
Roso Kuna Buji Doze Yelo Zhuji Yangde Su Roda Chiru Nimu Ninu Leje Zhazhu Zhuzi Ji Mare Mise Dongi Nyugu Jini Junzi Zhizhino Dene Doji Saji Dosen Yudin Lizo Jasen Doyengu Jira Jidon Jini Jini Dali Mis Jambe Yana De Ara Bazana De Ara Bazana De Ara Bazana De Zedin Jeje Chira Yuze Dali Demu Mibara Sene Kada Denje Jalo Tobayi Lojo Bobi Nawan Zado Lo Sai Do Sho Ji Me 相波同灭一念能着的，确定的月的当照边边，在上各上六年四年末，要见识别极乐所望的，当愿月面兄弟乐中当。大万众宝这边可就见，上界观众宝宝要在说，上摩大愿极乐所望的，西主当边穷安阿爹上，高当天边面光中正见，念就能行过去送罗嗦。高到了嘛能了所望的，看见心的自己中国梦，我到这边我修接着的，当我这边到不给住的，要是就不见了所望的，要从跟的老妈多的强，看了刚的心念最重的。说当天魔我中存在面，真见喇嘛那拉所望的，让将所着跟了大圆明，给上他把这边中我求，在月这边他看在把眼，甚至些年能拉所望的，结我跟着养到喇嘛。这面去着白马龙须间，撒当龙家有点绕左呢，多久强给过，娘多一球，上街去当出街就能了，想求不多当年就做的，大概去街这边做了的，到了平时上街就不修。上街去，出街就能了，想就不多当年就做，大概去街这边错能见，到了平时上街就不修，上街就当出街就能了，想就不多当年就做，大概去街这边错能见。到了平时上街就不修。哎呀，哎呀，当个这他妈他的他的，俺那他讲着的三节呢，至于他们的了，那就不他们那就啥也讲呢，那也不对，你讲着三节一次一点，那上节就说明过呢，你给我讲到的送不多。你这个吃点真心别讲呢，等到新年呢，你吃点真心别讲呢，介绍完了，没事给跟我交通都是这个的，现在没事演这些叫我个别说的这多，那样当我就不特别下线人咋呢？对对的，我这去写去。
So it is the tradition of great masters of the past. That cultivation of the appropriate motivations or the positive motivation is very crucial in the beginning of receiving the teachings or giving the teachings. So therefore, we must cultivate our motivations in accordance with the refuge formula that we have recited earlier. I take refuge in teachers until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and so forth. So this, for us, we are pretty familiar with this, the meaning of this verse. So it doesn't really require the detailed explanation of this verse. It really, constitutes taking refuge in jewels and cultivation of bodhicitta, which is the cultivation, which literally means the cultivation of motivations. And so, while reciting this, we should, cultivate our motivations, the positive motivations, by following and reflecting one's mind upon the meaning of this verse and cultivate motivations.
당가 지당가 전남비세가 된저기 초가지 간저지 인체절로 정도 zon제세네 정도 인지미지 정도 선제 혼데제네 아니 초가 있나 가리는 주고야지 이 전체 가르서는 가서 지당에나 가서 사실 강가대 아니 가서 란수부터 베세거라 다 간제 상황세네래 네 라니라 라니 저토에게 찬찬 창소면 와인잖아요 아니 진실을 땡거 와인잖아 땡사 땡야 만노하지라 땡네 아니 샤워데 두고 와인잖아요 아니 정도도 개체 무슨 거라.
So we are all familiar with whenever we engage in the practice, whether we're engaging in the performing the Buddhist rituals or engaging in any kind of activities, our practice or the activities which related to Dharma, including ritual practices and ritual performance and so on and so forth, are all requires a practice of taking refuge in three jewels prior to one's actual practice. Practice of taking refuge in three jewels is required, and so the reason for that is because we as our ordinary beings at the moment we do not have a capability of protecting ourselves from the sufferings. So since we have no capability of protecting ourselves from this sufferings, we have to rely on someone who could help us or who could actually protect us from sufferings. So therefore, the taking refuge in three jewels should be, should be practiced prior to any practice that we've engaged.
당가 정도세디 인지미지 현실을 저서는 별로 고문 거 같아. 정도는 지저든 저서는 랑게 터져지비. 아니 정도는 내가 최초적으로 되어와. 당당한 중에 속에 동행에 적거나 근데 랑게 로바 속에 냥내를 적고 있는 랑게 로바 속에 냥내 대한 추억을 주고. 인산의 정도세디 파쇼지 당가서 대전하게 따도 소리지 지 규조진의 명예 인지된 15번의 지역이 천왕 매자와지. 아니 지 정도 제세 대한 랑지 단계에 지로 고알렌도 아니 고 최기 디만도지 얘기도 와.
So here now, when speaking about taking refuge in three jewels, you should have an idea that while we're taking refuge in three jewels, it is unlike other religious traditions that when we talk about having faith in someone, and you're just having a faith in someone who is eternal, which already existed there, and there's no sense of hope and sense of aspiration for yourself to be in that particular position, whether it is creators or gods or whatever, almighty gods and so on and so forth. But here, unlike those spiritual traditions, the Buddhist way of taking refuge in three jewels is normally when we talk about object of refuge, we talk about causal object of refuge and the resultant object of refuge. So when you are taking at this point, you are taking refuge in causal object of refuge with the hope of achieving resultant object of refuge within oneself in the future. So therefore, when speaking about taking refuge in three jewels, you should not think about someone right there and then you're just being taken refuge in three jewels, but you yourself is that, may I become the object of refuge to whom I'm taking refuge right now. And then you have the potential and you have this, seeds where you can be the object of refuge in the future.
대인산에 제스 쇼라기네 다니다기 그런 생인데 아니지 산나도서 내가 최초때 데려도 라니 라서 지저도 이나 세대 샤야 이나 라니 라서 때도야지 지 생주래 돼 근데 라니 저거마도 같이는 신 전전을 산나도셔데 랑수무도기 차도도 셰발 맞아 로드 법에 나와서도 로드기 법에 대해면도.
So here now, Therefore, Shantideva has stated that one is one's own refuge or the protector, and one is one's own oneself. One is one's own, oneself is one's own enemies and so forth. So here, we should have an idea or the encouragement of becoming yourself as a protector of your own self. Because all the time when we think about, I take refuge, I rely on someone, and your hope of becoming yourself a protector, if you do not have a hope of becoming yourself as a protector, and if you keep on relying on someone, then you'll actually lose the self-confidence. So in order to get the self-confidence and encourage yourself, that you should understand that I have this potential to become myself as a protector of my own self. Sorry.
다 들리게 미바체 베토네는 아주 가만히 있으면 미바체 아니 다 아주 깨차 카도시네 데레 근데 지저 쳐서게 나히지 얘는 아니 쳐서 나히게 제저 단다 제저지 아니 제봉어도 전에 아니 년 타협이 선제 되다 아니 쳐서 나히게 고발해 그위 아니 대이치대는 이제 것을 봐 친이 제게 생에데 아니 미바 레토와 이나다 대바치 미쳐대 차그래 랑이 냐네 대 차그러.
So now let's cultivate appropriate positive motivations by thinking that at the moment that I take refuge in 3 jewels, to whom you are taking refuge in 3 jewels is the causal object of refuge. That is the object you are taking refuge. And then you focus on your resultant object of refuge, which is the 3 jewels that is to be accomplished by oneself in the future. So just as you have achieved the quality of 3 jewels and gained the complete state of enlightenment to work for the welfare of other sentient beings, may I too achieve this resultant state of object of refuge in the future, so that I can, as you may I also work for the welfare of all other sentient beings by achieving complete state of enlightenment. If you're able to cultivate such motivations, this will become what we call a Mahayanan motivations, and it's also called the practice of the Mahayana. These motivations, let's take 2 minutes to meditate. Sorry.
아야, 어떤 게 경로 쳐봐지냐는 가슴 바세 유치는 대바치 비추. 대나게. 네 거수 봐봐니 상조랑저리 봐스네니. 당 가족이 이제 대세로 집에 담아서 샤이를 시즈잖아요. 사송주 점에. 단 미시비 미바스에 사송주 점에. 송.
So this motivations, the teaching that we are receiving is the minor teachings, and the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment. In particular, there's a particular teaching that we are receiving, which is also known as Sasum Gidami, which is the lamp for three worlds, or the lamp for three realms. Lamp for three realms referring to the dispel of the darkness of ignorance in three realms. So this is the particular teaching that we are receiving today.
야, 당가 같은 로인다. 다들이 인자네 된트게네. 당가서도 주변 담바서 용 첨부 땡라 배워야 되니. 지당 사제권에 땡라 배. 사제권에 땡라 배워야 되기. 고빠지세 가르야 돼서 소만. 뭐 신도 너보다서나 사제 코로나 토네. 아니 용기 제자 연수도 같아 관련 되기. 아니 대 내가 첨부 있잖아. 사제 줘야 돼. 아니 라네 남아도서 사제도 사제 네바도 줘야 돼. 진짜 되니 이제로 와. 지용대 니마를 사직을 선하지 또나 가는 로상에 참석 연주 리지 가서 고할 레로에지도.
So it is the Lam Rim, the teachings, the tradition of the teachings of the Lam Rim. The teacher will always go through the outlines, whatever the chapters or the subject matter that we may have covered in the past. All those outlines must be read by the teachings, the teachers. The reason for that is because for the practitioner who has a sharp faculty, who possesses sharp faculties, or who have a very sharp intellect, can actually meditate while the teacher is actually going through the reading of the outlines. And the students can actually follow the teacher's recitation of reading of those outlines, and followed by the brief meditation of that, and you'll be able to comprehend the actual meaning of whatever the chapter that we have covered in the past.
추군 쯤바 땜비신 제법이 차와 생에게 가서 메시지 만다와 주여서 라이바 마치 모데 온게 지 산노 동거 마이바 아니 라마테다데 로지를 따네 디송비 용데를 주여지지 인데 추군 쯤바 땜비신 제법이 차와 생에게 마치 고아치는 랜도데 딘디게 내당토네 생에서는 배시에 되고 싶지도.
So here now the Lam Rim, the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, begins with the first outline of the greatness of the authors given in order to show that the teaching has a noble source. So now, whether this particular teaching has a noble source or not can be verified by the composer or the teacher himself, whoever wrote this particular text. If you look at the backgrounds or their biographies of those teachers, will then enables you to understand how immaculate this teaching is.
당마라 기바체비시 취지 채워생인데 저는 최대로 가고 제거를 가르쳤는지 인샤샤로 많이 봐. 아니 최대게 아니 채와 가려도 될 때는 저런 가고 제에서 양 전생들 리파 잡대잖아. 아니 최대로 가고 제게 전생 소용도.
So then the next outlines, showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the instructions. So now, here, it is not that this is a great teaching that you just follow, but rather there is a reasoning behind this outline itself. Because you know the greatness of these teachings, So by knowing the greatness of these teachings, you then have you're able to cultivate a genuine respect and reverence for these instructions.
아니 저원이 단데 출연이 시작다 세요데 아니 라마티기 공시가래 임바 최대기 공바세네레 손바보다 손이가 이 공바 가래 임바데 아니 배초동배 된다라 아니 공바 점마 치진데 줘야 되라 아니 니히 지가서 니히 제다 샤워생이 돼요 내가 쉬기지려도.
So then here is how to listen to the teachings in which both both the teachings and its authors are the great. So it with two greatness, respecting with two greatness. It really tells you, how do you really actually, receive the teachings, how you actually give the teachings by understanding those greatness. So then it is the sequence, the next outlines would be, the important outlines would be which is the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instructions, then how to rely on the teachers, the route of path, and how the students train their minds after having relied on the teachers. So if you really look at those, the way they lay out all those outlines, a phrase, chronological orders, if you really look at that. Now, see, when it says that the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instructions and how to rely on teachers, which is the root of one's path, and so on. And then having relied on the teachers and how the students train their mind after having relied on the teacher, which will then be followed by, and how to extract. The teachers will then encourage you to how to extract the essence in this precious human rebirth.
아니 단힘보 동본 단지사 단힘보 lense dela ni jubu sonje langjerin bati jubu chungye da temo langjerin ma nyasa lense jubu renda temo nyasa lemba nyasa lense jubu chembe langjerin ma nyasa lense yeje ta ene ngacho tomboni de chate ne tama jubu chembe langjerin ma nyasa lense yeje ta jubu chembe langjerin ma nyasa lense dela sonje tejenla jubu go tamba senje khona temba sente jeda jibe chu senje ne shoba la lo chu yeje 다가 투세 동본이 차다 생전에 쇼발로 로제되는 송어지 가서 로발로 로그비 전세 아니 토시레르 로비 산제면 주바 템바 아니 로바니를 로바 아생네 아니 가서게 주베 쳔베게 아니 생전에 쇼발로 로츠에 생이디 카도 되려래 손지.
So we are on the particular chapter. We are under the particular chapter of having generated the bodhicitta, how we can actually engage in the deeds of the bodhisattva.
당아서 제단대로 상주기 생지에서 가르쳐 버렸잖아. 아니 생지에서 켈렌사나 아니 켈렌데 두고로 아니 켈렌데 두비 된다. 켈렌데 두고비 제세 가르래. 아니 켈렌데 두나 아니 카헤지 두는 이거 참소 두고 그래야 돼. 더신인가 그거를 세더라.
So here now, it is not really adequate just by, cultivating or just by generating bodhicitta alone. So when you generate bodhicitta, it's you are actually committing yourself. Having generated bodhicitta, what will you be doing? There's a commitment, right? So then if you're unable to, engage in the deeds of the bodhisattvas, then whatever the commitment that you may have committed in the past, and you're actually, not fulfilling your commitments. To fulfill your commitment, you have to carry on to the engaging in the practice of the bodhisattva's deed.
됐지. 다 된되게 생가속에 생전에 셔발로 호고래서 터신이 소소하게 민주비 진짜 가르래서 거지라 아니 이제 저번에 제시온 아니 저번에 전에 되라로 아니 생전에 셔발로 호고에 진도 요 말에 타치 되면도 예시지로 공부 제송이나 다랑게 상전 두토고마도 제다도서 또바랑지래 제기 게 생기지 좀 되게 저번에 카톨랑아서 저번에 다 전년도 거기도
So therefore, we are on the particular, chapter where we are, having a disagreement with other positions, because here now, once we have generated the bodhicitta, it is not just sufficient to engage in one particular practice of the method aspect, or without method, it is sufficient to just to practice wisdom aspect, devoid from method aspect, and unlike other positions. So we are now here to actually to refuting the others' positions where they have stated that in order to gain the complete state of enlightenment, you don't need to practice you don't have to go through all those practices, but rather if you can just focus on single pointedness, on the nothingness, will the actual path to state of enlightenment. That is what we are, referring here.
근데 거기를 가서 파쇼게 되게 지전지를 내가 또 찍고를 사는 또 하지. 근데 고 제시셔들 아니기 때문에 아니 쉬쉬게 토네 아니 상추세다 연종을 소바데 네바도 냐살래고도 다이쇼네 다음에 받은 게 받다 때라 패는 마도 아니 터신이 야제지게 개개해금도 되게 터시 야제면 마세데 만화와지 네바도 그거도 세계 대토다 아니 사제 대토는 라니를 해고 고아데 되래.
So now here when speaking about, when we are talking about refuting others' positions, one should not have the notion of just mere refuting and becoming oneself as an opponent of someone, and you're refuting, and that is not the main point of refuting others' position. What you have to understand here is now, you should know why it is not okay just to follow that other's position. You should understand why it is not really appropriate just follow the other's position, because here you should have a strong, understanding, or the proper understanding of importance of practicing renunciations, love, compassion, and so forth, and then and in conjunction with practice of meditating on selflessness.
that's it. 다 가서 저기 상상된 데서 되게 아니 사제바 고바 주바 손데게 자세게 쇼발에 로고바데 아니 대신 시바게 규여레스 아니 사제바 고바 손데 다바 사손지 내거라 아니 녀지 창조 방 상에 거라 단다양 파신 주발에 로고고야나 아니 사마다 내거자다 시험고 와라 와스 가서 가서 이 단다딩인 저게 저 맞아 단다데레. So
here now we touched this topic a little bit during our last session, Sunday session, that even though the bodhisattvas who are on the 3 pure bhumis, such as 8 bhumi and 9th and 10 bhumis, even though those bodhisattvas who are on those pure bhumis need to be reminded by the Tathagatas by saying that you still need to engage in the practice of the 6 perfections. Even if those high levels of who gain higher bhumis, who are on the higher bhumis of the bodhisattva's level, need to engage in continue to practice in 6 perfections, then suddenly, as we as initial practitioners who are not even on the bhumi, we're not even on the path, should practice the 6 perfections. Important to practice 6 perfections. Sorry.
Because pay going to share some. Then the summer of you negola, just a shable of low Maguna, then give up Montalo of a hair money. Pena Johnson no Trino head sanging, Lungian Jordan Tembiton, any Gijil head sanging dead any Sajaba Gobas on Peja. Any Trino Mading at the summer taking the jetty. Some out of the negola, just a shable of Madonna, Bonta, the Cabalas of a hair Marison, because pay you going to Sonsoir.
So we also talked about that during our last teachings, that if you haven't, when you are not, when the practitioner who is not on the bhumi, if you are neglecting the practice of 6 perfections, suddenly you will not, it is going to take a longer time, like hundreds and thousands of eons to get to gain a state of enlightenment. Even those who are on the path, who are actually, very close to state of enlightenment, requires a rigorous practice of the 6 perfections. More or less, this mulam de long. So here it says, now you fool yourself. We're going back to, which it's already covered, but we're going back to that. The second paragraph, last 2 lines, where it says, you fool yourself, therefore, by saying, I have a shortcut, and then not learning the Bodhisattva's deeds.
아니 소소 라니게 따와르지 총재제네 아니 제서지 쇼바데 종첨보다 템비토네 아니 제거 말했잖아요 지 총재제 제다 아니 델레라네 라하와지 미도아.
So it certainly fools ourselves, because if you keep on if you keep on putting an effort to engaging in practice of single pointed meditation on nothingness, one is actually fooling oneself, because this will not really take you to the state of enlightenment at all, without engagement of the practice of the Bodhisattva's deeds, such as 6 perfection and so on. So here, particularly if you look at the Master Lama Tsongkhapa, he has gone through a rigorous studies of the Buddhist texts, particularly the texts that are written by the great Indian masters. It is called great texts written by the great Indian masters. He has gone through the rigorous studies, contemplation, meditation on that. So therefore, His Holiness always, he often says that it is very important for the teacher, to have this knowledge of entire teachings of the Buddha, particularly the written by the great Indian masters.
When I draw the Tendri Kodela, Tendri Yajeshu, draw maybe Derisoni that Tendri Kari and Yinsi, but the Derikola, Pena Jeromoje, Jean La Rabo, the Kilomas Kazatsimba Magic Killa Sheet, Zani Jinruchun Sheta said, Hallerendo. And the Jongo is only the Jeromoje, Shagman Landers on Jin Sarah, Mazbatana. Roa, Zani Jinruchun Sheta, Jean La Shore, the Rabba, Simba Magic Killa Sheet, Jansen Deroa. And Jeromoje Nata Corona, Jendu is your share, Jedda. Hana Dinkin, Bear Conjing John, Yonso Zobati. Demazison, Yamara Soda. To drink it on Shudo Jang again, Masho and Mari Jumbo, Dojo Chan, and Lorejamos and the Yananger invitation to Jiro.
So therefore, this is why His Holiness always, advise us to rely on the teacher who has a knowledge of those great, the deities and sutras that are written by the great deities that are written by the great Indian masters. It is by His Holiness actually is following the advice that he's giving us is because he's following his own, great masters of the past, such as Lama Tsongkhapa, has mentioned very clearly that first, once studying and contemplating and meditating must be on the basis of the deities that are written by the great Indian masters, such as Gendruk Chonyi, which is the 6 ornaments and 2 supremes. And that's what he said, one must follow their texts, one must follow their footsteps. So it is therefore His Holiness always advise us to really to not only just satisfied by one particular text or one particular study, but try your best to really to open up and study upon the great deities written by the great Indian masters.
This is the best. This is there's a cousin him and yellow, but see him what in the Catula, Dodger and Jana, and Jima Loyundi, the Pachachi Jadu, Soso Dodger, the Jimolodi, the Angati Abuchi Tasha Science, Soso, Zonda Tona, the new door.
So when we go through this teachings of the Lam Rim Chenmo, and whenever you find there's some very important points, it is always good to highlight it, so that it is easier for you to reverse. And when you want to go ahead and look at that particular chapter or the lines or verse, you'll be able to find very easily.
Mission be Mimiji Jimba Tsala, Dejenda Hamanaja Tsanshin, Doleja Reno to Trudun, Duba Sombi, Shiro Yana, and yet somewhat on Jinjana, Aleo Yana Asi, Tibadolo Regida, Juro Yana.
So let's read through the text now. So 93, page 93. I think it's 3rd paragraph. Opponent's position, it says. I do not assert the generosity and so forth are unnecessary, but rather that they are fully present in the state of mind that lacks any thoughts. Because the absence of adherence to a giver, gift, and recipients makes non-apprehending generosity fully present, and in the same way, the remaining perfections are fully present too. It is also because the sutras say that you include the practice of all 6 perfections within the practice of each.
코송 세죠. 코송 덴바 멤버. 코송 제단 코송 세소나 아니 짐바도 오질 빼잖아. 아니 짐바보 짐바 당수유 아니 짐비 제송들라. 아니 코송 세거래. 당아서 진샤시지 짐비 제선.
맞아.
지도는 아주 중요한 단위적으로 코송.
So this is also known as in Tibetan, it's called korsum. Here, what is meant by korsum? So I'll just it is it's also called the the threefold concepts, which is also known as the knowledge that doesn't conceptualize the three sphere or the threefold objectless. The actual translation of the Course of Mimic by threefold objectless. What is meant by threefold objectless is here, for instance, take an example of engaging the practice of generosity. You have agent. Agent is oneself who's actually engaging in practice, and the substance that is to be given to someone, and then object to whom you are giving. So those three are what is known as threefold objectless.
뒤에 가서 가데 야나 가서 초바르지 배우거나 코소 매매박이 제다 버세야 돼. 양 홍화를 제나 코소 매매박이 제다 버세야 돼. 동반이게 제다 세대 코소 세대 아니 저당 샤와다 아니 샤바보다 아니 샤유일라잖아 저거래 아니 가서 심바르데 심비 초바에는 추비 제다를 작으로 depending 가 전부 뒤에 가서.
So this is very, very important whenever we engage in the practice. Application of the threefold objectless. It's very, very important. Such as when you're engaging in the practice of, dedications, when you're doing a dedications, when you're making an offerings, doing any kinds of practices, the practice must be, conjoined or practice must be embraced by the threefold objectless, which is what is meant by threefold objectless here is now the threefold objectless constituted by the lack of conceptual imagination of the three circles, the wisdom that is free of any conceptual realization of that agent activities and the goals as having any inherent identity of their own, and knowing that these are being empty of inherent existence. That is what is meant by threefold objectless.
당가서 거기서 봐봐 지금 되게 된다라 저번주에 세거라 단지 거 가서 하샹로서 봐 대다게 아니 인치미지게 매미바 감바 다하라게 아니 파신 쪽에 양례의 창거리 가르세나 아니 콜라 아니 고소 진지게 제서 고소 대바메바데 인치미 일면 셔버 다하라 창거에서 나와이나 이나 아사 아니 다 오늘 죄도 다용도.
So now that's others opponents. The opponent's position has already stated that within the practice of nothingness, single-pointed meditation of nothingness encapsulates the practice of generosity, because the threefold objectless is already included in this. So if this is the case, then we argue from next. Our argument is from next, which is reply. We are arguing and refuting the opponents, the others' opponents' position. We'll begin from the next chapter.
니랑랑 취니라 남바 메토비체 샹추 셈비 쇼바 탕체 차원 저에 태천번 저로 손도.
So here now we're replying to this other's position here. Reply, if they are fully present in the state of mind that lacks thought, then when non-Buddhist meditators are in meditative equipoise, even in single-pointed states of serenity, all the perfections would be fully present, because they also are not adhering to a giver, gift, and recipients. In particular, when Shervaka and Pratyeka Buddha non-conceptually perceive the real nature, as in the earlier quotations from the sutra, the 10 levels of the Bodhisattva's deeds would be fully present. Lasso.
Te ko de cha so de ji jian yi le me xia ba de mi mi ba do ba zang ji de ji le mo ji ji chang yi chang ge le lo tu ye na ni xin ne zhu bi shi ro ba de de la pa xin zhu chang se ge che ge ni la ba de ni ran de se le shang chu sen ge shang chu sen bi xia ba nyang ne chang zu chang se ge che ge ye se ni zhe dang de.
So just mere meditating and focusing on single-pointed focus on nothingness alone will enable one to achieve all this practice of 6 perfections can be perfected. Then even the non-Buddhist meditators who are on the single-pointed meditation on samadhi would also need to be asserted as a perfecting the practice of 6 perfections. Similarly, the Shervaka and Pratyeka Buddhas, when we should also assert, if this is the case, then we should also assert they are also perfecting their practice of bodhicittas and so on and so forth.
So
what we are saying here is now, because your position holds that other than nothingness, if you're able to focus your mind on other than nothingness, this become a perfect path to state of enlightenment. If this is the case, then there are many others, such as non-Buddhist meditators, Shervaka and Pratyeka Buddhas, are the same. They also have the same, engaging in meditations without wandering their mind.
바이 조다 치제진바 네데 셰소지장 조가여바 손베 데코나리 소송도 대나 송도 아니 그말로 데라오지네 도데부도
And so all the bodhisattvas did would be fully present, so they would absolutely be Mahayana practitioners. And if you assert that just one practice is sufficient, because the sutra says that all 6 perfections are included in each, well then, since it also says all 6 are presented even when offering a mandala, while reciting the verse beginning, giving cow dung together with water, it would also enough to do only this.
대나서 따외 심비 쇼바 당사 토지 심비 싫어네 빼나 딱 맞게네 와나 토데 싫어기 로텔 신수 가래를 살아와야 나서야 돼.
So then here what it says in the deeds imbued with the philosophical view and wisdom imbued with the method may be understood by the way of analogy and an analogy.
Penasa Buduba shi Yange Nai Mades, Jen Mawala Sobal and Jubice, Logi Jang Yange Shute, Reshute, Matanya, Lotena Tanchi, Yange Loi, Megoba Zendo, Tombani, Tobi Shero Shutana, Jimba Tawata, Shata Guada, Dejushi Pizze, Tedala Mibi, Lotena, Tony Toba Mai Jang, this Zeon Shuta, Nemba Juba Mingala. Tungo Daba Shanchu, Sen Shutaba, Hundu Dana, 동반이지 띵엔진라 샤비 체 상주지 센데 무슨 매장 디 제심바 민가로 대나 대도와라 민바미 비심바 셰샤이 동이 셈바 때메발라 짐바 미ty라 대전도 라마라양 셰바 샤오 다시 야만저위 수양 대다 셰바 샤오 소
When a mother's stricken with the grief at the death of her beloved child, engages in conversation and other activities with others, with feelings she expressed do not eliminate the force of her grief. Yet not every feelings she expressed is necessarily grief. Similarly, if the wisdom that knows emptiness is very strong, even though the state of mind associated with the giving, making obeisance, and circumambulating, and or reciting are not cognitions of emptiness. This still does not preclude your being involved in them while endowed with the potency or force of the cognition of emptiness. For instance, at the start of meditation session, if you first generate a very strong spirit of enlightenment, this spirit of enlightenment is not manifestly there when you then enter meditation equipoise in the concentration on emptiness. Yet this does not preclude the concentrations being imbued with the potency of the spirit of enlightenment. So this is really important, it actually tells us of how important it is for us to, have cultivate appropriate motivations whenever we engage in the practice and dedicate one's own merits after having practiced. Then my test, lots of minutes. Then test lots of minutes.
Oh, me give a load.
Let me read it. I haven't completed the reading. There's one more paragraph that I have not completed earlier. So here it says, it is this sort of things that is referred to by term non-apprehending generosity. It is not that a complete absence of the generous attitude, wherein giving is not visible. So understand that the remaining perfection is a similar way. Know also that this is how method and wisdom are inseparable. That's all.
Yeah.
So there is an example that's set a very good analogy, right? Here it says, when the mother is grieving, a grief mother whose only son passed away, whose beloved son passed away, and during the time, the mother will always have a remembrance of her son, regardless of whether the mother is engaging any other activities or speaking, talking, and socializing with other people, but she will always have, part of her mind is always on the remembrance of her passed away son, or the child, sorry.
인지미지 아마기 버데 종고에 내봐요 말에 빼는 희망 가서 가서 제치자된래 제치자되면 제장아 가서 제장아에 가서 로봇이 제가 너무 너무 보여다. 그게 아마 되게 이제 지 나시 좀먹잖아 양나 강제 양나 차가 동비 걸어 양 아마데 가지 양수 많이 오사 양 뭐서게 칼라 던져서 칼라 심보진 야종원에 자용한데 양 아마 많이 오사 그래서 맞은 로봇을 그 버지라 아마데 버텔 저와시 의지하단 치수 연주 버데 인지미지만 용로마다 아마 형사를 나와래 근데 아미 저와게 같이는 버텔 저와래 되진도
So this mother's unconditional love to their beloved child is witnessed by all of us. Even in my own case, when I escaped from Tibet in 1985, I knew one person who was with me. We were escaping together to India from Tibet, and I was told later on that although that the son was alive, but her son was alive, but the mother, whenever she, whenever she is actually observing a special day, she always remember her son, who is escaped, who actually fled to India, who already fled to India, and whenever she's having a good food, and there's some kind of entertainment or going through the moment of joyful experiences, immediately she remembers her beloved son who actually fled to India, and so much so that I was told that she even becomes so emotional, and then I was told that she actually became mentally unstable. Let's take a 10 minutes break here.
야, 당가도 되냐? 내가 됐어요. 또 당가도 네, 상추세대 돈이도 왜 싫어하게 간다 생각을 아니 상추게 생데 돈이도 별로 간다 생각을 세네네. 대로 세미세 세게. 다시 맞은 데 로벨란지 내버서 다시 야마되어서 지지게 센출마도 아니 지 다시 손제 나기가 좀 가서 시라 손제 나기 요로니 지 뒤지도 여고나 뒤지도 지지로 로봇이 깨쳐도 말해.
So here, the one thing that we really need to understand, important to understand, is when speaking about, the practice of bodhicitta, in other words, a generation of bodhicitta, and the practice of meditation on emptiness, or the wisdom, does not mean that it is necessary to have both, does not mean that it should exist. It should be within one's continuum simultaneously. That is not that we're speaking about. We're not talking about the actual unity of these two at all time. Rather, we're talking about, embrace or the imbued or the embraced by the wisdom, imbued by bodhicitta, and bodhicitta imbued by the wisdom.
내가 치셔대 로 대다되게 센세디 로 코노쇼라 공부 benno 돈이 도비 로기 셈발라 알레 돈이 도비 로데 공부 가세게 공부 슈체 먹어도 공부 슈체 먹어서는 공부 되게 줘대 다다메게 샤와젠다들 로데 센요로 다 내가 치셔대 공부 거로 공부 건지대 거로.
So how do we really embrace what is meant by imbued by, for instance, the bodhicitta or your practice of generosities are imbued by the wisdom realizing emptiness? So the most important part here is one must have a very strong familiarization, or one must have a genuine familiarization with the practice of emptiness. If you have an intense and very strong familiarization with the practice of meditation on emptiness, then whenever you engage in any kind of activities, such as generosity and so forth, then all of these actions, your actions will be embraced, or at least you'll have a flavor of understanding of emptiness.
전적이 돈이 또비 로기 생비 심바들라니 미메지 심바 아니 지 샤도고 가르인선에 미바메버세니 덴지기 슈침보 당도 진배마체 아니 간사 코노기 샤와 제데 제거래다 아니 유대의 주비긴 제단 슈침보 되어 말이에요.
So if one is able to familiarize oneself very strongly with practice meditation on emptiness, and when one is engaging in practice of generosity, such as giving a gift to someone, then your practice of generosity will become what we call the practice of generosity of objectless practice of generosity. Mingmegi chimba, objectless practice of generosity. Because your very practice of generosity is actually imbued by the understanding of emptiness.
던드지 내거들 샤와 제비거라 가서 주마답이 레카 제비 손이 지로 가서 주마답 대도 주마답 세나리 가제 지 피게데 은에 말에 버기지기 정문세는 그 버기기 정문에서 로기 현차 되니라 피게들 은에 저 인비기 천원매 지래요 던드기 천원래 그래 간살.
So if one's practice is then imbued by one's practice of the wisdom realizing emptiness, then whenever you engage in whatever activities, whatever the kind of activities that you may be engaged in, and all of these activities will appear to you as an illusion-like. You are, in other words, that you will be able to see that they're all not having any inherent existence, inherent identity. You will see this as a just mere illusion, just like when you see some kids who are playing outside, then whatever their kind of play that actually engage in, engaging in some kind of activities, you mere looking at this, and this is just a kid's play. They're just playing. You will have this kind of understanding.
상추 생기 세세대야 대장에 다고 말해. 상추 생의 점마다고 상추 생기 세대 코 돈이 또사 야당 용해대 상추 생들에다 상추 생기 생지대 로아 코 nga zo ina senje ba ne shen de shi se shen ye de dong ni do ba je yue de ko ya ju ju bi ja dong ye son de ni shang chu ge sen ma jo hi jo de la sa yen de de yong ye ni le ka che de yen de yin ba de gi jo ji dong son na la sa yen de yin ba de chuan na de le yu ma do ka du dong ni do bi ga la de ye lo bi ne ga dong ni de yi le chang mo le jo yin za ni de ge ra ba de ngen ze to ga ma re ko yi gi jo ji dang wa de wa na yang yen de yin ba.
So here, when speaking about now the wisdom realizing emptiness imbued by the bodhicitta, it is unlike the wisdom realizing emptiness. Bodhicitta imbued by the wisdom realizing emptiness. That's the difference in between the two. When speaking about or by embracing or imbuing each other. So here, when it comes to the wisdom that is emptiness that is imbued by the bodhicitta, that doesn't mean that it is just like when the individual is engaging in the deep meditative equipoise on the wisdom that is on emptiness. At the moment, there is no such bodhicitta is generated simultaneously with wisdom realizing emptiness. However, when the individual is actually, transcend him or herself to the post-meditational period, and then his or her actions of other activities will become solely for the benefit of other beings. This is what is meant by the wisdom that is emptiness must be imbued or embraced by the bodhicitta.
Mishibi shiti tamu de pambala toni to lo chamba ipantu kumare ne digala pasien jendagi lene lo de chare no sonan shu chere tan na to tende je de ngaso shenju le yana de da tanje to be shero de sonse de pasien dula soba yonsu zoba de ne tatu na shiti tamu pambi shi toni to lo raji le chedola ne sonsha juchi.
So we find in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's of Life where it stated that, the practice of generosity and so forth are all meant for one practice, which is the generation of wisdom realizing emptiness. Why it is so here is now wisdom realizing emptiness become a direct antidote towards direct antidotes towards obscuration to liberation and obscuration to omniscience. So particularly wisdom realizing emptiness, to become this wisdom, the particular wisdom realizing emptiness, direct antidote towards the subtle level of obscurations, which is the obscuration to omniscience. It needs to be supported. It needs a supporting factors of practice of generosity, which bodhicitta, morality, and so on and so forth. Because without support from the other practice of six perfections, such as generosity and so forth, wisdom realizing emptiness alone will not serve as a remedy or will not serve as an antidote towards elimination of subtlemost, obscurations, which is obscuration to omniscience.
Shanchu Sangi Musen and Richuba Chimbugi, me Dewate, and Saint Tanchi down Rani Mendemian de Toyotera. Saint Tanchi the Rani Mendemian de Tobi Tandala, Shanchu Sene Chiba, Shanchu Sembi Shabala, and the Rimbajan the Loba just say there are. Saint Tanchi Dando, Menebian de Tobala, Passion to let do Mobajala Soba, Lona Mato, and Shitty Tom of the Palm Tubate, Tony Mosu to be Nerayo, but Tarangi, Gotubra.
So here now, the very objective of generating bodhicitta, the generation of the bodhicitta, is to achieve non-abiding nirvana, non-abiding nirvana, for the benefit of all other sentient beings. Right? So here now, without having this, without perfecting the practice of six perfections, perfecting the practice of six perfection, it is certainly not possible one to gain the state of non-abiding nirvana, which is complete state of enlightenment. So if we were to assert that without engaging in such other practices, such as generosity and so forth, if we were to gain the state of enlightenment, mere meditating on wisdom realizing emptiness, then Sherpa and Patika should gain the state of enlightenment. However, it's not so.
Tatuna, and Shanchu Sangi Kumatone, and the Karsa Pashatul Jewels and Shanchu Sangi ne, and Tatuye, Donio to be sure. Trashing tower the Chevi Gandala, Pashatul Hobbit, and Donio to be low man and Jigumare, Shanchu Saman and Jigumare, and Toshing near butter, and Toshi Sondech and Rodamato, Yangawachi, such a care Hegamaris.
It is by means of cultivating bodhicitta principle bodhicitta will intensify one's practice of wisdom realizing emptiness, and such emptiness and the practice of other perfections, such as generosity and so forth. And it is by means of cultivating bodhicitta will force oneself to understand the subtlemost level of ultimate nature of reality, which enables one to gain the state of enlightenment. Because so therefore, it requires, in order to gain the state of enlightenment, it requires the perfection of the both aspect of the path, wisdom aspect of the path, as well as the method aspect of the path. One devoid of another will not be able to gain the state of enlightenment.
다 된대게 사천보다 상추 센데 또 파신 졸라서 봐냐네 여기 상추 센버 대달라 가서기 기마 동거에서 게마 고알랭거에서 게마 땅 내가 최초의 소속의 냐네 돈은 아니 냐네지 철을 준비지 아니 많은 정보지면서 만다 나와나 돈이도 별로 간다 생거를 상추 센 간다 생거를 세다 소소하게 한번 주고야 되더라.
So here the most important part for us to understand here is now whenever we engage in any kind of activities, virtuous activities, or practice, in other words, one's practice must be embraced by wisdom, realizing emptiness, or the bodhicitta, right? The awakening mind. So even one engages in the practice of reciting mantras, such as 6-syllable mantras, Om Mani Padme Hum, and so on. And once very practiced, how can we how can we make this particular practice embraced or imbued by wisdom, realizing emptiness, or the bodhicitta?
다 된주텔라 가서기 지 계정 강체바텔라 아니 상추 생기 생나 아니 조비 메셔와 맨데면 냐데기 저도 그래 아니 돈이 또 별로 이게 생나 아니 다 답이 제세나래 다 단지 보면이 보더라.
So if one's practice, one's dharma practice is embraced or imbued by the awakening mind or the bodhicitta, this will then become a cause for gaining state of complete enlightenment or the non-abiding nirvana. If one's practice is imbued or embraced by wisdom, realizing emptiness, it will then become a cause for gaining liberations.
다 되니까래 내가 최초에 소소를 상추선데 돈이도 고아돼서 여비 토네 아니 간대진 거 주고여서나 아니 대대 냠비 토네 아니 삼발로 초여비 토네 아니 계정을 줘야 들어.
So it is therefore very important for us to have a proper understanding of what is meant by bodhicitta, how to practice bodhicitta, and how to generate bodhicitta within one's continuum. Similarly, it is important for one to understand what is meant by emptiness, how to practice and how to meditate upon emptiness correctly. So whenever we engage in any kind of practice, so all the practice, your spiritual practice must be done on the basis of cultivation of these two aspects, method aspect and wisdom aspects.
되지. 다시 야만의 수요 대다 시바샤오 세들이 다 데려다 내가.
So this is what is meant by here. It says know also that this is how method and wisdom are inseparable. One must understand, in other words, one must understand it. The literal translation here is one must understand how important it is to practice inseparability of wisdom and method. That is what is meant by.
안gel로게다. 선어지 초나진 제부 코이 류당롱시당 세령와라 소바 손바랑 추바 메자데 털라 케바당 싫어다 제나 데다 인양 데다게 세나 타바당 타지진비 주신도 롱데 렌첸칭와레 zuju kasa zuju konen dodina jebo sna sola chung she somba ta taye so no taye so sondo
That's all.
e somba te no taye so sondo.
That's all. So here, let's read through the text again. Furthermore, you should not misconstrue statement that things in cyclic existence, such as your body, resources, and a long lifespan, are the result of collection of mirrors. They are so only in the absence of skill in means and wisdom. When a collection of mirrors are imbued with this is entirely proper that they are the cause of liberation and omniscience. There are limitless passage in the scripture which says as much, such as this one from the precious garlands. To sum up, the embodiment of form, O king, is born from the collection of mirrors.
The Sanaji so then the Shad Chimbi than the Sanaji so Jimbaton than the Cheshodani, Lonshe Yongore, Serimo Yongore, Senate, Nacho Chedangi, Chikila Yoroa. Get Sanjimato, Telegent, Yomares and the Tuna. And Taco Kasi Yagalako said the Jimbaton Soba, any Kuala Koegi, Jumado, any Tapala Togi in Pento Mendu, in Sane Bangu, do Senate, Ripache Tayaroa.
So here now, one should not misconstrue that one's practice of accumulation of merits will only give a result of having a resource, of excellent body, long lifespan, and so on and so forth. This is not only the result that one should, one should think of achieving by means of engaging in one's engaging practice of accumulating merits. So then, if we were to assert in this way, and this will then really, we are really following the opponent's statement that the opponent's position already stated that such practice of accumulation of merits are said to be only a cause for taking rebirth in cyclic existence.
That the talk about Ben Shanchuki send the Donu to be sure that Chena, any Charanka, Tezanja Zona, any Donu to be sure down, any Talakeba Shanchuki send us so sensona, and Sanje Sujaku Jondo.
So here now, if one's practice of accumulation of merits, such as practice of generosity, morality, and so on and so forth, if those practices are devoid from cultivation, devoid from generation, bodhicitta, and wisdom realizing emptiness, suddenly this will become mere result of taking rebirth within the cyclic existence. However, if one is able to imbue one's practice of accumulation merits by wisdom realizing emptiness and bodhicitta, suddenly this will become a cause for gaining state of enlightenment.
Renchitawai Sumana Gere, any Jebo La Kari Showares and Tachomundu, Matsoy in a Tigiteroa, in Zujuko the Chuko the Zukus and Alaura. Chukude, any Tonio to Beloda, Taichane, any Mahombane, and Jebetichon. No Zujuko, any Sonagi Chosane, any Zujuko the Chon or Sanje Kote, Tesondoa.
So here now, when we talk about gaining the state of enlightenment, we talked about the Buddha's body, right? Here are all the kayas. So there are, a number of kayas, but if we were to, if we were to condense those kayas, it can be subsumed within the two kayas. It can be subsumed within the two kayas, which is the form, which is the rupa kaya, which is the form body, and then chugu, which is the dharmakaya. So the dharmakaya is a result of wisdom realizing emptiness, and the rupakaya is a result of wisdom, accumulation of various merits, such as practice of generosity and so on. So therefore it says there are many quotations that we could find in the sutras and shastras, the achievement of the two kayas by means of accumulating the both merits and wisdom.
Rengane Nindri Jun Roi Yenshu Dang, Nyomo Tanchi Sanji Jiku Duniba Mala. Rengane Nguti Jujubi, Jimba Dang Tsurin La Sobi, Geva Nanjo Kuiji Yinji, Shanchu Jumin Sewan, Tangye, Sene de Pola, Nunshi, Yandole, Sondo.
So here now, let's read through the text here. Moreover, it looks like you are saying that even all ill deeds and afflictions that cause the miserable realms can sometimes become cause of Buddhahood, and that virtue, the virtue, generosity, ethical discipline, and so forth, that leads to high status, cause secular existence, but does not become a cause of Buddhahood. So compose yourself before you speak. Do not misconstrue the following statement from the sutra.
Oh, that's it. That day you repeat from the Carson, you gone like you, and Toba Tanji Panja Mato, and Jata the Sata in a Kanga Panja city, and Jimba the Chutrin Soba Kanga Panja, Koi Juris and Chila. Young Mimi Bolanyamba Jaj and Benegos and Chanto in the Sando in Missy Konyane Chakamaricella, you did, Yomoto say, Sanji Jula Chai, and then Yakandu saying, repeat from such in the colony dying.
Muje engage sunga engage takta chungmaso.
Oh, Taji Ranga Kola Kogi Karsa, Nisha to say young. Taji Jolo Dogo said, the repeat Ponsa de Ko Jim Mishaba Yilla Jen, Dedo Ayana, and Taji Shimbi Kosona Soba Kangatin, the sound over the suit in Yale Check Maris, Chilo Yundi, and Tadriana, and Nisha Soba Yonso Zoba, Jim Yilla Mashaba, the sound over us. And it there Sanjay Jicha and Yakandu us. Ribi Ponsato, Nibate the Congress Laura, Jimbala Sobateta, and Kui Juris at Tabi Seta in Nita in the Bangu Rimato, Toba in Taji Ponja, which Chelsea, Sutrino Soba Chato, Kui Juri Ponja Laura. In that Cherang gets a shivat and Gandhi do any Samba Lulechene, any catch a shit as and Kajano Ginara.
So here now, we are, pointing at contradictions of the other's, opponent's position. Because in the beginning, he said that he had stated that if one engages in the practice of mere nothingness, the single-pointed meditation on mere nothingness is the only cause to a state of complete enlightenment. Having said that, he then again said, all the practice of generosity and so forth are included within that. So there's a contradictions. In the beginning, he said only meditating on the single-pointed concentration or meditation on nothingness will gain the state of enlightenment, not others, will all become a cause for secular existence. Yet at the same time, then later on, he said, this practice of it encapsulates the practice of other, method aspects, the practice of the method, such as generosity and so on and so forth. So certainly there is a, contradictions in his statement.
That's it. Young dollars on the Yokogi, Jedan Tender, Tanda, Hashangi, Pegi, Tigi Shijal, Dokas, cousin, Jetchis Town, Sonda, Pegi, Domo Shuji Tando, Tenor, and Dokahi, Yokogi Lontan, Doba Panja in begin, don't let the triangle, the town in the Kolkayo. Young dollars, young dollars. Yellow
Lazarus.
Dole said the Kuya Karsa, Hashing Shiji, daughter, trying daughter.
That's less.
Young Dolesa, Jinso Tola Momba Shemba Digeleso, Shetan, Pumba Somba Le, Mipaluma, Jimba, Long, Sutrin, Chunzinji, Sutrin, Suala Soba, Teda Tanchi, Soso Shaso, Shejeo, Sheba, Sombe Sheba Le, Shoba Jiniba, Teda Tanchi, Toba. Yonsu Toba Tanjini Shanchubo, She Sumba Nala Chuba Mejate, not on Bitane.
So here the sutras, the quotation from the sutras. We talked about earlier that during our previous teachings, that we find that actually Hajang have found that many, he quoted from many sutras, the quotation that he quoted in the text, or by saying that whatever the conceptual thought that may be, is need to be abandoned to gain the state of enlightenment. But he quoted from the many sutras, as much as 80 kinds of sutras. But one of this, again, that sutra he's quoting is adhering to the six perfections, generosity, and so forth. It's a demonic activities. From the Three Hips Sutra, the Skanda Sutra. It says, confess each of these, descending to the level of object existence and giving gifts, observing ethical disciplines because of belief in the supremacy of ethics, etc. So this quotation that the Ashang is quoting from Sutra is to claiming that this Sutra actually explains the conceptual thought, conceptions, any kind of conception, whether it is a positive or negative conceptual thoughts, it must be abandoned. It is all the object of abandonment. So here, in the form of sutra requested by the Brahma Paripracha Sutra, all analysis is conceptual thoughts. All analysis is conceptual thought. The conceptual is enlightenment. The meaning of this first passage. So, meaning of this first passage here refers to that he says, the adhering to the sixth perfection, generosity, and so forth is the demonic activities. So now we're, explaining the meaning of this sutra, his quotations. The meaning of this first passage is the generosity, etc., motivated by a mistaken adherence to the two types of self, and the self of person and the self of object is not pure, and therefore is stated to be a demonic activities. This passage does not teach that the generosity and so forth is demonic activities. Otherwise, since it mentions all six perfections, you would also have to assert that the perfections of the meditative stabilizations and wisdom are demonic activities.
That's 아니 크게 되버들라 아니 파신 두기는 사된 파신의 싫어 파신이 버데 뒤지는 크게 빠져서 라고 말해. 코로나 시불라. 근데 사한테 제지된 양 버자고 그래. 아니 매매버도 버데 싫어 파신에서 라고로. 아니 저라게 다다로 되는 저들 론도노라 파신 두가데 뒤질래서 손도와 됐잖아. 아니 파신 타만이 뒤질래레베스. 콜팔지 전도하셔래.
So then here we are criticizing his position, the other's position. It is just because you already, if you take this sutra's, statement literally, adhering to the six perfections, generosity, and so forth is demonic activities, then you are not, then entire six perfection, practice six perfections as demonic activities, then what are the activities that will become a path to enlightenment? So here, instead that the Hashang actually does not assert the last two practice of perfections, perfection of concentration and perfection of wisdoms, are not the abandonment. Those are not the object of abandonment. He asserts those two are the actual practice which leads oneself to the state of enlightenment. However, according to your quotations, if this is so, then this too must be also the demonic practices, demonic activities.
That's nga so ranglu le kare se na ani mi pa hwa se so na senjing yi shu chimbo jimbi ye ani phashe jobo de dijele re somba re ma do phashe jobo khono dijele re somba mare so do do khono ge khatu tanda.
So it is very clearly mentioned, the meaning of this sutra, which is the meaning of the first passage is generosity, etc., motivated by the mystic and adherence to the two types of the self. If it is motivated, if mystic and motivation, then this will become an activity, so that demonic activities. Otherwise, it will not become a demonic activities.
제 파션 타마니보다 뒤지 레슨 더바 지시에서는 코너 저랑이 델레 파션 타마니 저랑이 델레스 캔레스 렌시에서는 니파 리핏 내지 동으로.
So then we are criticizing very clearly here. You would also have to assert, if this is the case, in other words, you would also have to assert that the perfection of meditative stabilizations, samadhi, and wisdom are demonic activities.
다 쳐서 대 과학하고만 동아도 세니바도 세는데 녀보 쉬어져요. 녀보서 저보다 내게 로통치여로 내제 동도 비기 내제 동도래.
So if you are very familiar with the Tibetan monastic debate, then this makes very good sense. But if you are not very familiar with that, and it takes a little time for us to understand how we defeat others' position and how we can, clarify the dispute between the other's position and one's own position and so on.
되지. 다코야 농니바텔 가르러서 심발로 소바네 미바 후아다 추춘로 소바네 소소 샤소셀 파시 주바데 소소 가서 소소 샤세디 디바 소소 샤세로아 미바 노 심발로 소바 소소 샤소셀네 로도 인자네 샤게 치진나 코 방자레세네 쇼지도 당샤로아 농니바테.
So the second scriptural passage, the meanings will be explained. But second scriptural passage is, now here it says, by the three hips of sutra. It is quoted by, the quotation is quoted by the others, the opponent's position, where it says, confess each of this, descending to the level of object existence and giving gifts, observing ethical discipline because of the belief in the supremacy of ethics. So the meaning will be explained in this particular paragraph.
Son ribale teta mason be shoro gore tamale sondo maso shoro nge lo shaka gore tamane len de teta seba de shide ne chete shijin lo re shi de shijin lo de gone shosho tanche kanza kan chuje dagin chenjin de shene chenje sun de be shoro sondo.
So here the second scripture passage means that the perfection are impure because of being motivated by a mystic and adherence, and explain that you must confess them. It does not teach that you should not be involved in generosity, etc. Otherwise, the meditation of a descent to the level of object existence in the phrase, descending to the level of objective existence and giving gifts would be unnecessary, and it would instead have stated, confess the giving of gifts in general, which does not in fact says. This method of the response formulated in the third stages of meditations emphasize an extremely important point, because Ashang's view misunderstands this passage and assert that the whole range of deed is qualified by sign, where the deeds are taken to do the apprehension of sign of the self, of person, and object.
당아주 카투고 시사야나 아니 전화기 게들 미발 홍화선에 전화기서도 전에 미발 홍화선에 러그게 민도 심바 동화소 샤바선에 러는 저거도아 되물어 이제 미발 홍화세 세윤디 아니 고아대요 예송래.
So this actually clearly explains the one you have quoted earlier by saying that descending to the level of object existence and giving and gift and giving gifts, observing ethical discipline because of the belief in the supremacy of ethics.
되지. 될 고네 바바는 소디 고지 신도 내가 첨부였는데 나중에는 치코노 놀을 시유디 배나 나서 뒤지 대로와 배나 가서 배나 자신 매바다 때는 매바니기 고아텔레디 아니 치코노라 자신 매바스나 로유디 아니 당다지 여바도 수도 때요도 세죠로 가시기 자신 매바를 때 타지도 매바 차로 그래서네 아니 다와킹도 아니 제가 나서게 대지 다와스네리 오메디 시유디 자신 매바스네 시주들 자신 매바레스 로유디 제다 지여바데 다랑이 때요도 치수기 고아게 제다데 저한테 때요도 소야죠 저희나 고아이나.
So here now, it's a very important explanation. It's explained in the stage of the third stages of meditation. Very extremely important point raised by that. Let's take another example. When we speak about non-inherent existence, or non-inherent existence, or lack of intrinsic existence. Sometimes, others, when speaking about non-inherent existence, they take it, they misconstrue this non-inherent existence by accepting non-existence and nothing existence. However, it's not so from one's own position. When speaking about non-inherent existence, must understood. If it is non-inherent existence, there's a different way of existence is actually, applied, or it is established by means of saying the non-inherent existence. So here now, it is when speaking about the genuine practice of generosity and then practice of descending to the level of object existence of giving gift, it's completely different. So therefore, when speaking about absence of the form, and absence the absence of the form and absence of the non-inherent existence of the form must have a completely different meaning, is to have a different meaning. Non-existence of in other words, non-existence of the form and form not being exist inherently are completely different.
Oh yeah, the Chitama the dollars and the Shijalo to Gone City, and Jimba the Mipalun is Jimba number Meshawaje, and Jimba Kono Shijalo to Gone, and Shubi Shugin, Toji Shugin, Chanson, and Cardoina, and Gane, and Chuja Danzi, the Denziki Jimbi, and Changes and Durban, hilarious on the.
So, if one has a mistaken understanding of those passages, then it is it will really become an obstacle for one's practices. Thinking that the practice of generosity and so on and so forth are becoming obstacles or demonic practice and demonic activities. So this becomes an obstacle for one's state of enlightenment and so on and so forth. It's completely not relevant.
Taking Penateri, Ranshi, Su Ranshi, Juba Kabata, Zu Kabani, the bed, taking Quachibanesona, Pede Young Casa, Chetanondora. Then I give Mipalun is Jibaka and Jimbaka Soina, better show your chance on the card over.
So here, just like we mentioned earlier, that when we are refuting, when you are refuting, there's a vast different meaning, a vast difference between refuting existence of form and refuting inherent existence of the form as a completely different meaning.
답변이 디파르를 로에도 뭐도 자상이. 당아도 되는다. 당아도 시에 간레나래 딱한테 터시지 야제송아이나 아니 사체 계획 말에 아니 내주상주제 생활 konshibisо 주문이지 다이슈 담마로 되는 문제야제니 당아도 통한 매번에 다다바다니 터시니라 고아만에 와 있잖아요. 대냥래 매제와잖아요. 뒤 다다바다라서 다네 내지 담바 투병 한번은 장관나마 종화 집에 라마나지 가는데 되네. 당에 네바도 터시 야마데와지 고바데 셰네 아니 대냥설내게 레네 만데 집에 라마나지 신절라네 타입의 선제타지 말아 한게 다시 야마데에 라나 고이 세네니 하나다 모아지로 지다.
Now, let's do our dedications by dedicating all our merits that we have accumulated at this point. By dedicating this, by thinking that right from the beginningless time up until now, we have wandered within this unenlightened existence without having a proper understanding of importance of cultivating wisdom aspect and method aspect. So from now, henceforth, as I have understood how important it is for us to accumulate and us to engage in the practice of both method aspect and the wisdom aspect, as it is practiced by the great teachers and taught by the great teachers such as Buddha Shakyamuni, Lama Tsongkhapa and so forth, have gone through those practices to accumulate, to attain both of those practices of method aspect and the wisdom aspect. So may I too engage in such practice to achieve both aspect, method aspect and wisdom aspect. And may all other sentient beings, may I lead all other sentient beings to the state where they can achieve the inseparable of the wisdom aspect and method aspect. May all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions to be able to do, bless me to be able to do this.
Kada yamba ganshi sabade lomi mare ke don joan nangren jaye ombo da je dema sebe sero gudoi jambe yangje zebe je zone dembe remba gunsa nangje nene dobe je na ne she jo rangye je je dobe nangje Shura zeve rangye dage je roye ye je mienba se xin jaye tenpa yuren zin ju je tenpa ren jen chugye ma chao cha chang nyangpa jebe shu tene nyen je chenpe yira jeba pede dede sewa sheba jo se jen jaye mi zhong chenle shang jo lang ju rinpe chang Tande nanje ye la be de shen, jia yin ze ba shen de zhong ju. Laza Rubi Tinjin Rushi Jin Gyujin Sisi Madam Mimi Sero Gundo Jaya Nabaye Nada Nada Dewa Manja Kanse Teba Chola Chishi Sijin Chola Zumba Devi Tudin Nanju Tado Joshi Trashi Jansi Shugin Chojo Chi Juzan Lamin Kutse Radin Nanga Tene Shuji Jeba Dang Lozang Tenbi Zhimen Sasung Roye Minse Dado Nenjo Ji Kanzhe Rayin Kuye Xingwan Pendang Dewa Mani Zhongyue Nen Xin Re Zhenghuan De Zhe Jia Cui Xiaobi Sindi Bado Denjo Ji Jiangbi Baoyue Qi Da Qianba Yundu Zangbo Denyang Dexin De Du Da Gunji Ji Si Da Rong Yewan De Da Tangji Rao Du Hong Ju Song Xibi Jiawan Tangji Hong Wang Gang Na Qiu Du Hong Ban Da Xin Ge Yue Za Wan De Gen Jiang Zhong Bo Xu Ji Rao Du Hong Wan Ji Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.